The Los Angeles home of Jennifer Lopez, one of the many lavish properties she has owned over the years, became the subject of eerie whispers and unsettling rumors that have lingered long after guests and former residents began to speak of strange occurrences within its walls. The mansion, perched in the hills of California, is no stranger to luxury, yet it carries with it an air of mystery, one that has sparked tales of paranormal phenomena. The story begins when Lopez first acquired the property, a modern marvel with high ceilings and expansive rooms designed for comfort and grandeur. However, it didn't take long for the first signs of something unusual to emerge. One evening, at a lavish party, guests were gathered in the living room, sipping cocktails and enjoying the music, when the atmosphere began to shift. Some felt a sudden drop in temperature, as if an invisible presence had entered the room. A few even reported hearing faint rustling noises coming from the hallways, though no one was there. They dismissed it at first as the wind or perhaps an old house creaking, but as the night wore on, the sensations grew more intense. Over time, the occurrences became more frequent and impossible to ignore. Former housekeepers, staff, and even close friends of Lopez have claimed to experience inexplicable events. One housekeeper, who had worked in the mansion for several years, recounted an unsettling incident in which she found herself locked in a room without explanation. The door, she said, had refused to open despite her frantic attempts, only for it to swing open moments later on its own. No one had been near it. Another time, a group of friends, including some celebrity guests, were having dinner in the dining room when the lights flickered and an ominous shadow appeared in the corner of the room. The guests were paralyzed with fear, unable to explain the shadow's movements, and the feeling of being watched lingered long after they left the room. Despite the increasing number of strange occurrences, it wasn't just the guests who felt the house's unusual energy. Lopez herself has spoken in passing about feeling strange sensations while inside the home. She claimed to have experienced moments of unease while walking through the house late at night, particularly when passing through the grand hallway or near a large mirror in the foyer. She described the sensation as if someone were watching her, though she was alone. But it wasn't just the house's atmosphere that raised suspicions. Some people close to Lopez began to speculate that the property might be haunted. The most chilling stories came from those who claimed to have witnessed figures in the window silhouettes that would vanish when approached. Others reported seeing an odd eclipse-like effect in certain rooms, as if the sunlight were suddenly blocked by an invisible force, casting the spaces in unnatural shadows. For years, the house continued to captivate with its mix of luxury and an unsettling atmosphere. Whether the strange events were simply the product of overactive imaginations or something far more mysterious is still up for debate. But those who spent time in the house, including Lopez herself, often describe it as a place where the line between the physical world and something beyond feels thin, a place where the strange and unexplained seem to creep just beneath the surface, ready to reveal themselves at any moment. While Jennifer Lopez has never publicly confirmed or denied the paranormal tales, the house remains a topic of fascination for those curious about the unknown. Some say it's just a mansion full of old creaks and shifts, while others believe there's something far darker lingering in the shadows of this celebrity home. As the years passed, the mysterious happenings at Jennifer Lopez's Los Angeles mansion became more difficult to ignore. The house, nestled in the hills with its stunning views, continued to attract the curious and the cautious alike. It wasn't just a celebrity home, it had become a place whispered about in both the Hollywood elite and local circles. Rumors spread like wildfire, and it wasn't long before the mansion had earned a reputation as one of the most haunted properties in the area. Despite the increasing number of unsettling events, the house had an undeniable allure. Guests who dared to stay overnight often found themselves unable to sleep, tossing and turning as an overwhelming feeling of being watched crept over them. One particular guest, a well-known actor, swore that he saw a figure in the hallway at midnight, a figure who seemed to glide, its movements graceful yet eerie. When he followed it, the figure disappeared into the wall. He was left standing in the hallway, heart racing, unable to explain what he had just witnessed. But it wasn't just the visitors who were affected. Lopez herself began to feel the house's strange pull more strongly. One evening, after returning from a business trip, She entered the mansion to find the atmosphere thick with an odd stillness. The house was eerily quiet, even for a mansion that large. As she walked through the foyer, she noticed something that sent chills down her spine. The large mirror, which she had always kept spotless, was covered in fog. And in the fog, faint shapes began to emerge. They looked like faces, distorted, twisted, yet undeniably human. Lopez backed away, her breath catching in her throat. She quickly called her staff, but when they arrived, the mirror was clear again, as if nothing had happened. It was then that she decided to take a more personal approach to the house's dark reputation. Lopez, known for her strength and determination, brought in a renowned paranormal investigator to try and uncover what was really happening. She was skeptical at first, believing the strange events were perhaps just a combination of coincidence, stress, and the house's age. But when the investigator, a man who had dealt with haunted properties for decades, entered the mansion, he immediately noticed something unusual. He claimed to feel a sudden pressure in the air as he stepped through the front door, like an invisible weight had settled upon him. He noted that the energy in the house was unlike anything he had ever encountered. That night, he conducted a session using a spirit box, a tool known for allowing spirits to communicate through a distorted radio frequency. The team sat in silence as the static buzzed through the room. Moments passed before the device began to crackle, and then clear as day a voice came through, whispering just one word: "Help." The voice was faint, but distinct, and it sounded as if it were coming from somewhere deep within the house. The investigator's eyes widened in disbelief. He urged Lopez to stay calm, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was trying to reach out. Over the following weeks, more incidents occurred that could not be explained by any logical means. Strange symbols appeared on the walls, symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. Staff members reported hearing footsteps behind them when no one was around, and one housekeeper claimed that she saw the silhouette of a man standing by the grand piano, only to find the room empty moments later. The most chilling event came one stormy night when Lopez, unable to sleep, decided to take a walk through the house. As she passed the library, she noticed a faint glow coming from beneath the door, as though something or someone was beckoning her inside. Hesitant but compelled by an inexplicable force, she opened the door and stepped into the room. The glow intensified as she walked closer to one of the bookshelves. And then, as if by some unseen hand, a book slid off the shelf, landing with a soft thud at her feet. She bent down to pick it up, and as she did, the room seemed to grow colder. The title of the book was simple: The Lost Ones. Lopez's fingers brushed against the cover, and in that moment, the room seemed to pulse with a strange energy. The book fell open to a page that had been marked. The words were cryptic, a warning perhaps, written in an old, flowing script: "The house is not what it seems. The past is alive and it watches. It always watches." It was then that Lopez realized that the mansion held a history far darker than she had ever imagined. The house wasn't simply haunted by spirits, it seemed to be a vessel for something far more sinister. Something had been waiting for her, watching her every move, and it was clear now that it wasn't going to let her leave unscathed. The next day, she gathered her staff and the investigator together, sharing what she had found. As they discussed the chilling events, they learned that the property had once belonged to an eccentric millionaire in the early 1900s, a man whose disappearance had been shrouded in mystery. Some believed he had been involved in occult practices, attempting to contact otherworldly entities. And as the team pieced together the history of the mansion, they uncovered a dark pattern of unusual deaths and disappearances connected to the property over the years. But the most disturbing revelation came when they discovered the original plans for the house hidden away in a forgotten attic. The plans revealed a secret room, one that was never meant to be found, concealed behind a wall in the deepest part of the mansion. A room that no one, not even Lopez, had ever known about. As the group prepared to search for the hidden room, the air grew thicker, heavier. Something was waiting, something that didn't want them to find the truth. And as Lopez and her team stood at the threshold of the unknown, they knew one thing for certain. Whatever lay behind that wall, it was not going to let them leave unscathed. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. After Jennifer Lopez decided to sell the house, the strange events seemed to follow in her wake. The mansion, still echoing with its dark past, found a new owner, a tech billionaire who had recently moved to Los Angeles, eager to make his mark in the city's luxury real estate market. He had heard whispers of the house's history, but he was the type who dismissed such things as superstition, confident in his wealth and the power of modern technology to control any situation. The first few months went by without incident. The new owner renovated parts of the mansion, replacing old fixtures and modernizing the grand spaces. But soon, the house began to reveal its true nature to its new residents, as if testing them in a way it hadn't with Lopez. One evening, while walking through the grand hallway with a guest, the billionaire noticed a painting that had hung on the wall for years. The painting depicted a man in a suit, standing under an ancient tree. But as he stared at the painting, the face of the man seemed to subtly shift, his eyes becoming sharper, more focused. For a moment, the billionaire swore he saw the man blink, his gaze following him across the room. He quickly shook it off as a trick of the light, but the feeling of being watched lingered. As the days passed, the unsettling sensations grew stronger. The new owner's assistant, a woman who had worked in the mansion for years, began hearing strange whispers at night. They weren't audible, but she would feel them, faint voices brushing against her mind. One evening, she decided to explore the mansion on her own, wanting to prove that the strange stories surrounding the house were just that, stories. But as she wandered through the empty halls, she was struck by an overwhelming sense of dread. The air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were watching her. The whispers grew louder, and she felt a cold, icy hand brush against her shoulder. In a panic, she rushed toward the staircase, but as she did, the ground seemed to shift beneath her feet. The mansion had a way of distorting space, making the familiar feel foreign. The stairs, once an easy path, now twisted unnaturally. She could no longer see the top of the stairs, just a swirling black void. It felt as though something was pulling her toward it, but she fought against the force and fled the house, her heart racing. The billionaire, still unconvinced by the reports, decided to host a private event at the mansion, inviting influential figures in the tech world. The night began with the usual glamour and sophistication, but as the evening progressed, things began to take a turn for the worse. Guests who were mingling in the grand ballroom noticed that their conversations seemed to echo strangely, as if the room itself was amplifying their words. The music, which had been playing from hidden speakers, began to distort, warping into an eerie, haunting tune that sent shivers down their spines. The chandelier above flickered, casting ominous shadows that danced unnaturally across the walls. The guests could no longer ignore the oppressive energy that filled the room. One of the guests, an experienced photographer, began snapping pictures of the ballroom, trying to capture the opulence of the event. But when she looked at her photos later, she was horrified to see something she hadn't noticed at the time: a shadowy figure standing in the far corner of the room. In the pictures, it appeared as if the figure's features were hidden in the darkness, but its eyes gleamed brightly, like twin beacons in the night. She couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was watching her through the lens, waiting. The billionaire, frustrated by the constant reports of strange occurrences, decided to confront the house directly. Determined to prove that his wealth and influence could overcome anything, he hired a team of paranormal experts to investigate the mansion. The team was skeptical at first, but even they couldn't deny the strange energy that clung to the property. As they began their investigation, the temperature in the house dropped rapidly, and the team's instruments began to malfunction. The spirit box, which had been silent for hours, suddenly crackled to life, and a voice came through, raspy and distant. "Leave now," the billionaire, trying to maintain control, brushed it off, but something inside him shifted. There was a growing realization that the house had its own will, one that was far stronger than his. The investigators began to explore the hidden parts of the mansion, searching for the long-rumored secret room. As they moved deeper into the house, the atmosphere became more oppressive, the air thick with a sense of foreboding. The closer they got to the area where the room was said to be, the more the house seemed to fight them. Doors slammed shut, Hallways stretched endlessly, leading them back to where they started. It was as if the house itself was changing, shifting, refusing to let them uncover its secrets. Then, one of the investigators, a woman with a particular sensitivity to paranormal energies, found herself in front of a blank wall in the basement. She felt an undeniable compulsion to touch the surface, and as her fingers brushed against it, a low rumble echoed through the floor. The wall cracked open, revealing a hidden passage. The team, filled with equal parts excitement and fear, ventured into the narrow corridor, their flashlights illuminating the dark, damp space. At the end of the passage, they discovered something that sent chills through their spines: a small, circular room, covered in strange markings and symbols. The air was thick, almost suffocating. The room felt ancient, untouched by time, as though it had been sealed off for centuries. In the center of the room was a stone altar, covered in dust and cobwebs. On the altar lay an object, an old, weathered book, bound in leather and etched with symbols the team couldn't recognize. When the investigator reached for it, the room seemed to shudder violently, and a voice echoed in her mind, warning her, "Do not open it." But it was too late. The moment she touched the book, the house seemed to come alive, its walls groaning, its floors shifting beneath their feet. The team scrambled to escape, but the passageway behind them had disappeared. They were trapped. As the mansion's dark history began to unravel, the billionaire realized that this was no ordinary house, it was a prison. And its prisoner was something far older, far darker than anyone had imagined. Something had been waiting for the right moment to awaken. And now that moment had come. The mansion's walls groaned with an unnatural force as the paranormal investigators struggled to find their bearings. The house seemed to close in on them, the air thick with an oppressive energy that made it impossible to think clearly. The moment the book had been touched, something inside the mansion had awakened a force that had been lying dormant for decades, perhaps even centuries. The woman who had found the book held it tightly in her hands, her fingers trembling as she flipped through the ancient pages. The symbols were unlike anything she had ever seen, a chaotic blend of languages and runes that seemed to shift with every glance. As she read aloud the strange incantations, the temperature in the room dropped to an unbearable chill, and the mansion seemed to grow darker. Shadows stretched across the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes, and whispers filled the air, speaking in a language no one could understand. Suddenly, the altar beneath the book began to glow, its stone surface pulsating with an eerie light. The mansion trembled, and the air became so thick that it felt as if the very foundation was about to crumble. The investigators, paralyzed by fear, could only watch in horror as a figure began to materialize before them. It was the man from the painting, the same face, the same eyes that had followed the billionaire through the hallways. But now he was no longer confined to the canvas. His form flickered in and out of existence, his body shifting between solid and ethereal, his eyes burning with an unnatural intensity. The figure spoke, his voice a low growl that seemed to reverberate through the walls. "You should not have come here. This house was never meant to be disturbed." The air became thick with a suffocating pressure, as if the walls themselves were closing in. The team backed away, but the figure moved with an unsettling grace, its eyes never leaving them. They could feel the house's dark history pressing down on them, the weight of the souls that had been trapped within its walls. "Leave now," the figure intoned, his voice filled with malice, "or you will join the others." The woman who had found the book screamed, clutching her chest as she gasped for air. She stumbled backward, dropping the book in the process. As it hit the floor, the house seemed to lurch violently, throwing everyone to the ground. The shadows in the room stretched forward, wrapping around them, pulling them toward the altar. The billionaire, realizing the true nature of the mansion, tried to run. But the house had other plans. The hallways that had once been familiar now twisted in impossible directions, leading him deeper into the labyrinthine corridors. Doors slammed shut in his face, trapping him in an endless maze of rooms. He could feel the presence of the house closing in on him, the figure from the painting watching his every move. Panicked and desperate, The billionaire finally stumbled into the grand ballroom, where his earlier event had taken place. The chandeliers above flickered, and the ghostly figure from the painting stood in the center of the room, waiting for him. His eyes glowed with a cold, unfeeling light as he spoke. "You cannot escape. The house will not let you leave." With a final, chilling laugh, the figure disappeared, leaving only silence behind. But the mansion continued to move, shifting its walls, trapping its inhabitants in a labyrinth of shifting rooms and endless corridors. The house had claimed them, and there would be no escape. When authorities arrived days later, drawn by reports of a missing person, they found the mansion empty. The billionaire's belongings were left behind, but there was no sign of him or the investigators. The house stood silent, as if nothing had ever happened, its dark history hidden once again behind its luxurious facade. But the mansion's secrets remained. The whispers in the walls still echoed faintly in the corners, and the figure from the painting, now a part of the house itself, continued to watch. The mansion had claimed another victim, but it was far from satisfied. Jennifer Lopez had long since moved on, but the house would never be the same. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. Any coincidences with real events or characters are accidental.